All right, welcome to the Keeping the Nostalgia Alive show. I am your host, Billy Powell. With us is Coach Jeff Strange. He's coached basketball for 27 years at Scecina, Tech, Roncalli, Irvinggton Prep, Shortridge, and Providence, Cristo. He's been a fan of the game of basketball. We're going to use the team Broad-Ripple a lot ever since Stacy Turan and that 1980 state championship. And Jeff, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I've got my UCLA shirt on today. So this time when I post it, hopefully UCLA will come through tonight in tonight's last four in.
It's pretty exciting. I mean, that all the games are here in Indiana. I mean, especially with Indiana being known for basketball. It's just, you know, I wish under the circumstances it was open up more than it is, but I mean, a lot of great games. And if you would ever thought that some of these teams would be playing at Assembly Hall and at Mackey, I mean, it's amazing.
And Indiana University not being in it. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, with the flag behind me. Oh, yeah. That's been, you know, it's been a heartbreaker ever since Coach Knight left. And, you know, and the younger generation, they're like, oh, you're not going to get him back. You know, things have changed, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, it hasn't been the same. They went to that championship game with Mike Davis, and then, you know, you bring in Kelvin Sampson and he puts his spin on things. And then, you know, I thought that Archie was a great hire, and it just didn't work out. So, I mean, without Indiana being in the tournament, it definitely it has a lot of people angry around here. That's for sure.
Yes, it does. And by the way, you're probably watching this on the Keeping the Nostalgia Live show on our YouTube channel. Please also go to Keeping the Nostalgia Alive. That's all one word, keepingthenostalgialive.podbean.com. And you can hear over 225 interviews with everything basically related to the great game of basketball. It wasn't invented in Indiana, but it was definitely almost perfected in it. Back to Coach Strange. Coach, you know, I have the University of Houston actually winning it all. What are your thoughts on the upcoming tournament and your kind of winners or your sleepers or your Final Four, or who's going to win it all?
I had Houston making it to the Final Four, and I had Baylor and Gonzaga in the championship, and I think that Scott Drew is gonna beat Gonzaga. You know, it would be nice to see Gonzaga make it all the way through, you know, because there's a lot of people that are against that right now and don't think it's going to happen. You know, of course, being an IU fan, you know, I think I was 2 or 3 when they went undefeated, but at the same time, you know, you want to keep something special like that. But I think that Scott Drew is doing a great job at Baylor, and I think that they've got a really good chance to do it.
You know, it's oh, man. So let's go back to Indiana University, since you've got that big flag hanging up behind you. As everybody can see too, I got Coach Knight behind me. I also, just for those Boilers, I got Coach Gene Cady down below. So I'm kind of equal opportunity here behind me with my swag or who I represent. But, you know, being in the game so long, I appreciate all basketball. But, you know, being a Indiana high school basketball coach, and I know we were talking about the college tournament. Who do you think Indiana University will have as head coach, or who would you like to see as head coach at Indiana University?
Well, the conspiracy theorists think it's going to be Beard from Texas Tech. I think that would be a good hire. Of course, you know, everybody in Indiana immediately is going to say, oh, Steve Alford needs to have the job, you know, just like they did when he was going into the NBA and they drafted Reggie Miller. You know, there's a lot of angry people. So the IU folk are always looking for Alford to get the job. Dane Fife's another name that they're mentioning around here. You know, he has the ties to the program. I think they need to bring somebody in that's going to bring it back to the way that it was. And it's easier said than done. And I know that sometimes you can't be the disciplinarian that Coach Knight was, but at the same time, you have to have consequences, and you need to put the time in to where the kids are working and wanting to get better. And it's, you know, like the big knock against them this year was their 3-point shooting. I mean, they had a hard time shooting, but, you know, there's enough hours in the day if you have the coaches working with them where you should be able to figure something out with that, I think.
You know, what really, I banged my head up against my desk in watching I think they lost their last 7 in a row.
Yeah.
You lost your last 7 in a row, basically knowing each one of those games that you lost, that the tournament was going to be in the state of Indiana. It just,
mind blowing.
it does. And, you know, they had their chance to play around and get Archie Miller in there. I feel that they have a good chance to make the program right again, back to one of the blue bloods, because all the blue bloods of college basketball are on the, you know, a little bit low on the totem pole. But I actually love to see that with Kentucky. But but I am a Duke backer too, just because Coach K learned everything he knew from Coach Knight. But I think they have the time. This is the time for them to do it right. And I just hope it's an Indiana guy, and that's my opinion.
Well, one of the things also kind of my theory is, you know, they go back to he had success at Dayton, you know, and Dayton's kind of a mid-major school. And in my opinion, a player that's at Dayton wants to be the player that's at IU or wants to be the player that's at Kentucky. So they're going to work their butts off to prove that they belong in Division I basketball. And when you get guys at Kentucky, you get guys at IU, not speaking for all the players, but some of them have been told how great they are their whole lives. And the work ethic, as opposed to that of somebody at Dayton or a friend of mine played at Loyola back in the 90s. The work ethic of those guys, and it's almost like they work harder to try to keep up with the top. And you know, and when they get those wins against those elite teams, I mean, that's like what it used to be winning a sectional back here when it was not class basketball.
You know, you put on any kind of social media, the topic of who's going to be the Indiana University coach. It blah, 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 it just goes crazy. And you got, you know, there's so, you know, opinions are like ears. Everybody has them, you know, and it's just another thing that you can put on Facebook, because we go into a little bit of a different subject, is you could put Blackford Bruins and Luke Brown, and all of a sudden it just explodes. What are your thoughts on the rest of the upcoming Indiana high school basketball tournament?
I think, you know, Luke Brown is a heck of a player. And, you know, and you're right about the message boards and things like that. A lot of people say, oh, is it a small school and he gets all these shots? I mean, you can either score or you can't score. I mean, that's the bottom line. And a lot of times when you go to vote, you know, for the Indiana All-Star team, Mr. Basketball and stuff like that, a lot of those kids that are really good, like a Luke Brown, and I can't remember where he's going to college. It's not, I don't think it's a
Stetson.
Okay, yeah, so Stetson. So Luke Brown's a heck of a ball player. And I don't think that the size of his high school should have anything to do with the way people judge him and his points. And I know his grandpa was his coach and everything like that, but you can either score or you can't score. I mean, if you're 4 for 60 or something, then, you know, we can talk about maybe getting too many shots, but I mean, the kid can put the ball in the basket. He's a heck of a ball player. And, you know, as far as I think for our class this year, I got to see Tenley play at our sectional. And they are very, very athletic. And I know Southwestern, Brady Days, they gave them a heck of a game last weekend. Brady's a really good coach. And I think that if anything, they gave Tenley a wake-up call that, hey, you know, we're not going to coast through this thing. We're going to have to come out because everybody's going to give us their A game. But I think Tenley, you know, I think they play Bar Reeve this week. And they're going to have to play the perfect game to beat them, because Bar Reeve is, yeah, I've seen them play a couple times this year, and I watched their documentary that they had on. I mean, that's a really good team, you know. And from having roots down in Lagodi and going to see games at the Hatchet House and down at Lagodi, and you know, watching Bar Reeve play, I mean, the program is really solid. I mean, they eat, sleep, and drink basketball down there.
You know, they are well coached, though. Bar Reeve is well coached by Coach Josh Thompson, and you know, I have followed them, and I think he's got all of their heads on straight, and I kind of see that Coach Thompson has a little bit of an advantage with his experience, and you know, I'm pulling for him. I'm sorry, I know you've seen Tinley play in that, but I'm pulling for Bar Reeve.
Hey, I'm a fan of all. Once I'm out, I'm a fan of all. You know, some coaching friends more than others, but I'm a fan of all.
You know, this is how, you know, you stop, like you said, talk stuff on social media and message boards and all this. And, you know, I have never really sat down and got to talk with Coach Jack Kiefer of Lawrence North. So with all the success that they've had, it's kind of like what Homer Simpson said one time, you know, share the wealth. So anytime anybody plays against Lawrence North, I kind of pull for them. Is that wrong?
I can tell you a quick story about that Lawrence North program. I never coached there, but I was coaching junior varsity basketball at Roncalli. It was during the Odin and Conley days. And we got there a little bit early. They had just wrapped up practice. And so they showed us into our locker room. Everybody, all the kids are gone. But Odin is in there with an assistant coach working on footwork. Everybody else is gone. Conley's down with an assistant coach getting jump shots up. And I took my guys out of the locker room. I said, if you want to get to that level, this is what it's about right here. I said, where's everybody else at? I said, they're probably with their girlfriends on their phones, doing whatever, playing video games. I said, these two guys right here are something special, and for those coaches are hungry too, to get that work in for those guys. And, we played against Jack when I was at Shortridge. It might've been last year not the prior year in a holiday tournament. They were solid. They were solid. And he, goodness. And I know, like at Lawrence North and Warren and stuff like that, they have kids walking the hallway that aren't on the team that are better than a lot of kids in the area. It's just that much talent and that much depth, and it goes back to their youth programs and their leagues and stuff they have bringing the kids up, I think. But it's easy to root against the guy because he's had so much success, but at the same time, he's got a system. And I think that's where success, especially in 4A, starts, is when you build something from the ground up, and it just, people flock to it.
I also want to give a shout out. I'm pulling for the Southridge Raiders. Also, I think they got a pretty good coaching team down there, coaching staff down there, and I'm just kind of pushing for those guys. Also, I don't know what your take is on. I think what is that 2A?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know much about them.
So, how do you? I know I'm gonna get a little ahead of myself here. And this is kind of a casual conversation going back and forth, and we've been wanting to do this for a long time, haven't we?
Right.
And finally, I get you on, and finally we get to a chat about this. But how do you feel about being able to recruit basketball players at a parochial or a Christian school or private school? And how do you feel about a coach that just takes what he gets based upon outlines for a public school? Does that make sense?
It does. I can tell you, I was there at Roncalli for 8 years with Coach Watts, and all of our kids came through the feeder program. So it wasn't like we were going out and looking for talent. They all came from, I think we had 8 feeders: Barnabas, St. Jude, all of them. And again, like with the Warren Township or Lawrence North, the CYO program is where those kids grew up. And then again, we would run clinics and camps at Roncalli, and we would just try to take the kids that were, technically would be our kids because they feed into us, and get them better. I know that like when I was at Irvinggton, it was a difficult situation because it was a small school. There weren't a lot of kids there. And then there would be kids come in from Warren Central. I'd never personally contacted any kid, but they would be playing basketball at the YMCA, and then kids on the team or whatever at the school would be like, oh, you need to come check the school out, blah, 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 blah. And then kids would come over that way. But as far as going out, and I will tell you one story though. It was the kid that played, this was a long time ago when I was at Tech. He's the kid that ended up going to Arlington and playing for Cincinnati. This is back in the 90s. But no, it wasn't him. It was another kid. That was Cathedral was after him, but he was in our feeder school for Tech. He went to Coleman, and Coleman fed into us. And I remember going to his games and just trying to, like, hey, you feed into us, we'd like, this is the way it's supposed to go. Come to us, because that's where he's supposed to go. And we ended up losing him to Cathedral. So, I'm a believer in trying to keep your own. Like if you have a feeder program, coaching your kids up, taking them through the system, trying to keep your own. I've never, and I probably would have had more success if I would have looked to recruit kids. But in my mind, it's not something I've ever done. And it's probably why I haven't won more games than I have. It's impure to me.
It was also kind of special being in a public school and beating those schools that had the ability to be able to recruit or offer scholarships at one of those schools. It was a kind of a little bit of a pound yourself on the chest because you beat a Cathedral or because you beat a Chittard.
Well, I know I went to Scecina and there weren't vouchers back then and there weren't any scholarships. All of us came through the feeder program and we had decent teams. And the thing that we look forward to is beating the public schools, because we were smaller enrollment. Of course, we didn't beat Tech back in the 90s because they won city 3 years in a row. That was one of the best group of kids I've ever seen at the high school level that didn't win a sectional. Aside from, Warren Central when they had Greg Graham and they had Bayless. I don't think they won a sectional and they were really solid. But it's funny you say that because that's the way that we kind of looked at it. We beat Warren my junior year and my senior year. And those were huge victories for us because they were, and it wasn't class basketball, but they were so big. And I would have went to Warren Central because I lived in their district, but I went to a Catholic grade school all the way up and my school fed into Scecina. But those were our victories.
So let's go back to when were you first introduced to the game and when did your love of the game, when did you like, man, I love this game of basketball? How small were you or what were your first initial memories of this great game of Indiana high school basketball?
Well, both of my parents were Scecina grads. So from the time I was 3 until whenever, we would always go to Scecina games on Friday and Saturday nights. And I think when I was probably 4 years old, the way our house was set up, we had a dining room / kitchen / the laundry room had these doors. It was a small house and they had bought me a basketball goal that I could set on top of the door. And I would just play for hours upon hours upon hours. And then when we got to the point where we had a microwave in there, of course, they weren't fancy ones like we have today, is the big old bulky one. I figured out how to set the timer on there. And so I would work on last second shots and last second scenarios. And, just growing up watching IU with my dad. And then, he had a special love. I mean, he was a baseball player first, but he had a special love for basketball. So he would take my brother and I on road trips. We got to go up and see Lyndon Jones and Jay Edwards and those guys play several times. Remember, saw him play Chittard one time up there. We go down to Lagodi, even up to the point where when we lost in sectionals my junior year, I think it was, Lagodi was playing Washington in the Hatchet House in the regional, and we drove down there for that to watch that game. And so it's always been something I've enjoyed. It's kind of a bond with me and my dad where we would watch games together and things like that. And then, going into my freshman year of high school, I had a pretty good middle school career, whatever. And then I get to high school and the first 9 games of the year, I don't get off the bench. And so instead of crying about it or quitting or whining, I go out in the driveway, I keep working. And the junior varsity coach happened to come to some of our practices and he asked the freshman coach why I wasn't playing. And there was no answer. So I remember we were playing Tech, ironically, the next game. And so he decided he was going to start me. And I ended up with like 14 points and 7 rebounds. Of course, we got smashed, but I had a really, really good game and ended up getting called up to JV at the end of the year. But so it just continued to grow. And so even with that speed bump of kind of being put aside, and the coach that actually called for me to get playing time ended up being my varsity coach. And I ended up coaching with him for the 2 years I was at Scecina. So for him to believe in me and it kept it going. And I wasn't going to quit. Like I said, I was out there putting in work. I'm still watching the games. It was something special. It's always been.
What kind of, I have my next question. I'm going to show you these 2 things. So tell me, this is my first one, the history of Lagodi basketball.
Is that the Jack Butcher one or the one from my cousin?
This is the one from cousin. You can see how thick that bad boy is.
I've got one of those, yeah.
So it's a history of Lagodi High School basketball, 1905 to 2008. That's how heavy it is. And then there is the history of Princeton Community High School basketball, 1908 to 2011 by Tim Nante.
Yes.
And then right behind me is Butcher Ball. It's not just a game. And there's a blurb and an autograph in there, Timmy.
That's nice. Yeah. Yeah. Tim is, we would go to family reunions once a year, and that stopped a few years ago. So I didn't really get to know Tim until Facebook and messaging and stuff like that. He and my dad are pretty close, but he and my uncle Ron, my dad's brother, who lives in North Carolina, they were super close. And so they still talk all the time. And I talk to Tim from time to time. But we were talking the other day because the Reds had a pitching coach. I'm a big Cincinnati Red fan. And they had a pitching coach from Lagodi. And I messaged Tim because I knew he got fired, I think, last year and the year before. And I just was curious because I was looking through some stuff. I asked him if he coached him. And Tim's like, yeah, I coached him. He said he was a really good ball player. And, I asked him if he's still coach. I think it was Mark Reagan is his name. And I was like, well, is he still coaching? And Tim said, no, he's retired from baseball. So, but yeah, I mean, Tim he was a basketball coach with Butcher. He was the baseball coach down there at Lagodi. And then he moved on to Princeton. So he's been very, very successful.
It's interesting. 6 degrees of separation is that I roomed with his son at Indiana State University my junior and senior year. So, and it's interesting when you're in high school, when you're in college, you don't know how your passion for whatever it's going to be that you're passionate about. You don't know what you're really surrounded with. And, if I would have known that, Coach Nante being in the Indiana Baseball Hall of Fame and him, that takes a lot of time to put something like that together, a lot of time and a lot of love for that. Cause that's not going to show up on your New York bestseller list.
No.
And, but I wish, there was times where I was a sponge at Broad Ripple High School, but I wish I would have been more of a sponge with Terry about his father and what he did back then, rather than learning it later in life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Coach Smith, I know you were there when he was there. I mean, he's a living legend. I mean, I would have liked to have got to know him and kind of seen, he worked magic. He worked magic with a lot of kids. That's for sure. And it was fun. I mean, we were talking about this at practice last year when Coach Woodson was with me, when Bill Woodson was with me. I'm like, I'll never forget they were playing Scecina, and they set up this out of bounds play. And I think it was Patrick Jelks, if I remember his name correctly. So Scecina guys are getting lost on their switches. I think I was in grade school, maybe middle school. They're getting lost on their switches. And how I remember that as a middle school or a grade school kid, I don't know. But they get lost on their switches. And all of a sudden, here comes Jelks down the lane from the alley-oop, and he dunks on 2 Scecina kids. I'm just like, oh, my goodness. I'm like, that was like – and those teams were so much fun to watch. And I was talking to another guy that played at Scecina when Lenore played. And I think they played in the city championship against Scecina. And it was close for a few minutes. And then Mark Lenore just took over. He's one of the better players to come out of the state as well. I mean, I put him right up there. The best player, one of the best players I ever coached against, I wasn't the head coach, but I was at Tech, was Rodney Carney. Because I had to scout when we played Northwest with Rodney Carney. And I go to Frank Craig, and I'm like, Frank, I said, we can't go out on him. He'll drive right by us. And he's like, well, I know. I said, well, we can't come out short because he'll knock the jump shot down in our face. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, I don't know how we're going to guard him. I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, he was phenomenal. He was a phenomenal player. I mean, he could do everything. There wasn't anything he couldn't do. And when he would get on a roll, he was very difficult to stop.
Man, you bring back a lot of memories there, because I was a part of that 86 team that won the city against Scecina. So at what point, I mean, you're getting ready to graduate high school. What were your decisions? What was your decision process like on where do I want to go to school? And at that same time, where do I want to go to college? Were you thinking about coaching basketball?
I actually the only place that really offered me anything for playing time was Mount St. Clair, and I think it's something else now. It was in Iowa. And so I seriously debated going there. And then I went to Franklin, and that summer I met with Kerry Prather, and I wasn't on his radar, and I met with the baseball coach at Franklin. And so I was going to try to walk on to baseball and basketball. I wanted to major in business and, ironically, broadcasting. And so throughout the first semester of my college year, I was playing in a fall baseball game, and I tore my rotator cuff. So that kind of ended that. And then I didn't play basketball. And my freshman year, you get into college, you have so much freedom because, oh, you don't have to do your homework. They don't grade your homework and things like that. So I got behind the 8 ball a little bit early, and I had to climb my way back out. And finally, it was during the summer going into my sophomore year. Actually, it was going into my junior year. I'm like, you know what? I'd already changed my major to physical education because I wanted to be a teacher, and I eventually wanted to be a coach. And then I went back to Scecina because my brother was on the team there, and I took him to summer workouts. And I went in and I talked to Coach McKenzie, Mike McKenzie, who was my coach. And I'm like, hey, can you help me get on a staff somewhere? I said, I don't need any money. I said, I just want to get my foot in the door. I want to get into coaching. And this is after, I think my first taste of coaching was I worked the Indiana All-Star basketball camp, is what they called it. Skip Collins ran it out at Marion College at the time. And so I got to work with Bob Punter and Baumholt and all these guys that were, they're really established coaches. And so when I go in, my coach is like, no, he's like, I'm not going to do that. I was like, okay. He's like, no, you're going to coach with me. And so I said, okay. So, he gave me a position as the freshman assistant coach, which I was totally fine with. I just wanted to get my foot in the door, and the passion started driving. Hold on. Oh, high five. That's my daughter. And then the next year I was the head freshman coach. And so we had, it was so much fun. We played in the tournament at Lafayette Central Catholic. And by the time those kids were seniors, LCC and Cathedral won state that year. But we from Scecina, we beat both of them and won the LCC freshman tournament, which was really exciting. And so I think, again, like I said, he helped me get my foot in the door. And then, I got my grades ahead. I started working hard as far as my academics. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And the year I graduated college, he left Scecina. And so that's when I ended up at Tech with Frank Craig. I happened to run into him one time. We were out at a store, and I saw him, and I recognized him. And that's how I got on there. But that's when, working at camp with the Skip Collins camp, and, Gene Cady would come in and speak, and it just, the camaraderie of the coaches and the conversation and the fun times that we had, I always knew that I kind of wanted to do it, but that's kind of what engraved it in to me that I wanted to do it.
Did you coach with Bob Cooley?
Bob Cooley left the year. He left when I came in. Did you know Coach Cooley? A little bit, and I know from a lot of the kids I coached at Tech that knew him, and a lot of people around that they knew Coach Cooley, and they spoke really highly of him. Said he was really good. Yeah, I think last year we lost him, but he was the freshman coach while I was at Broad Ripple High School, and just a fantastic human being. So he's missed. So I wish I would have been able to get him on the show. Yeah, everybody speaks highly of him. So take us through the steps, your coaching steps. I know we may need an extra half hour for this, but take us through the steps of your coaching career. So like I said, I started as a freshman assistant at Scecina, and then I was the head freshman coach. And then I was the freshman coach at Tech for Coach Craig, and J.R. Schelt was on our staff as well. That ended up, being the head coach at Fishers and at LC. He was on our staff. And then, so I had success at Tech. We had some really good teams, and that's where I kind of learned different things about coaching. Like, you have to play to your strengths. So there were sets that I loved to run, but they weren't conducive to the sets I loved to run the most at Scecina. I could not run because we had to do other things. We were more of a flex team, but it taught me that I need to be a student of the game and adapt. And when I see things that other teams are doing, which I would get to that at Roncalli, but I love doing scout team for Roncalli with my JV kids, because I would steal their team's plays, their varsity plays, and run them against their JV team on Friday and Saturday nights, which was a lot of fun. But I mean, and you know, working with Coach Craig, it was really good because he was a real teacher of the game. It wasn't, we're going to go up and down all practice long. We're going to do skill and drill. And we did a lot of that. And we had a lot of fun and a lot of success. And then at the end of my time at Tech, I was teaching at Howe and coaching at Tech. And Frank wanted me to come down and coach and teach in the building. And at that time, I liked my job at Howe and I didn't want to leave Howe. And he was like, well, I really need somebody in the building, you know, to help keep an eye on things. And so we parted ways. And then I happened to work UIndy camp, and Michael Wantz was working the UIndy camp. So I happened to be looking at a newspaper one day, and I was like, I saw that Michael Wantz was hired as the head coach at Roncalli. And so he and I had a lot of good basketball conversations while we worked that camp for the week, just different situations, scenarios, talking about stuff. And so I called UIndy's office, Coach Sturgeon's office, to see if I could get his phone number. And he's like, no, I'll give him your number. You know, he can call you. And so we ended up meeting up, and I ended up going with him. And he was like, do you want to be the JV coach or varsity assistant? I was like, it doesn't matter. And he's like, well, I have another guy that wants to be varsity assistant. I'm like, that's fine. And so we kind of played off each other a lot. I mean, shared ideas and things like that. And he is one of the most detailed coaches I've ever worked with. I mean, he's very, very attention to detail, and he sees everything. I mean, he does. When we watch film, he'll see something that the other coaches don't see. And we were able to have a lot of success there. I remember we came up short against Chatard a couple times in the sectional, and then we finally got over the hump and won the sectional. And so we go out to Newcastle to play in the regional, and Brebeuf had kind of been our poison. We had a hard time with Brebeuf because they used to run this, they get up by 4 and they'd run this double stack delay game, which was very difficult. I mean, it was very difficult to stop it. I mean, we tried everything. But we ended up beating Rushville in the first game, and we beat them by a pretty decent score. And then we came back that night, and Stegall and Zach Hahn's Newcastle team, you know, playing them on their court. And the place was packed. I mean, I saw a picture. The Indy Star had a picture. Sometimes they put it up when they show pictures of high school basketball where one whole side of that field house is red, you know, and the other side is green. I mean, it was packed to the rafters. And we ended up, I remember there was like a minute and a half left. And again, this was the first sectional we won. Now we're in the regional. And Pat Crosley and Michael and I, we kind of looked at each other and we're like, we're going to win this thing. And, you know, it just kind of set in, and then cutting the nets down there. I mean, it was a great experience. So then we go down and we play at Seymour in the semi-state. And Lagodi played Hauser before us. And then we played Washington with the oldest Zeller. And we're in the locker room, and it's just madness because the Lagodi game is going on, and you hear the stomping, and it's just coming down on you. And it was just electric. And then we get out there, and of course they had Zeller, who was going to Notre Dame, and we had a bunch of Division I football players, and we got in a little bit of foul trouble early, and I think we came up 5 points short. But I mean, just experiencing that, going into the field house and going into going into Seymour, it just kept driving and pushing, and you know, this is what it's all about. And then after I left Roncalli, I went to Irvinggton, and it was kind of a startup program. And the first year was difficult because the players looked at it like an AAU team. And I would come into practice on a Saturday morning and I'd have 3 kids. And so it was a tough build. I think we were 10-9 the first year. And I actually kicked my best player off the team the second game of practice because he was loafing. And I said, we're not going to do that. And I said, try, run again. And he loafed again. I'm like, just go. And so I was trying to send the kids a message that I'm not messing around. And the ironic thing is he ended up getting kicked out of school. And then the next year school rolls around and he comes to an open gym, doesn't say a word. After the open gym's over, he apologizes. And then he turns out to be one of the nicest kids and one of the best players I ever coached. And we had it, and then the principal at the school came up to me at practice one day and he's like, well, what did you do to him? I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, he came up in the hallway today and said hi to me and asked me how my day was going. He said, that's not the same kid we had last year. And I said, well, I think he loves the game of basketball and it's important to him. And so then after that, we had some rough seasons at Irvington. We had a different grade policy than anybody else in the state. They would check grades every week. And if you had an F, you couldn't play. So I'm going into study hall and I'm going into band. I'm trying to pull kids out, trying to stack a roster. And then my last 2 years there, we were very successful. We were 18-6 my second to last year and 16-8 my last year. We could never get over the hump in the sectional. We did win a couple sectional games, but we had some issues happen at the end of the season where we lost kids in both the years. Our best player we lost in the second to last year, and then in the last year we lost our best player, which was very it was heartbreaking because we put all the time and effort in, and then everything we worked for was kind of gone. And then so after that I went to Shortridge, and they hadn't won a conference game the previous year, and we had a kid named Andre Dickerson that played for me. I think he was up at South Suburban Junior College last year. But he had put all this time in during the summer, and he wasn't getting a lot of shots because they had 2 other kids the year before that were taking a ton of shots, so he wasn't getting a lot of shots. But he had worked his butt off, and he came in, and he ended up making the 1,000-point club. He ended up, I think he set the school record for points in the game. He's 3rd all-time leading scorer now. And we ended up winning our division of the conference and losing a heartbreaker to University in the championship of the conference when they hadn't won a conference game prior. We had our payback list where everybody that beat them, we would check them off as we beat them. And then my last year at Shortridge, we didn't have it was a rebuild. And so we had a lot of young guys that didn't have a lot of experience. We graduated a ton. And then this year at Providence, I ran into the same situation. They won 20 games the year prior, but he graduated everybody. And I remember talking to Pete when these kids that graduated were sophomores. He's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. He goes, I don't have any freshmen. He goes, all we have is sophomores. He goes, and I have 15 of them. So at that year, his last year there, they had to have kids play JV that were seniors just so they could have a JV team. And then so this year, that's what I kind of ran into was another rebuild. And with COVID and everything else, there were times when I didn't know if we were going to have a season because I had 5 kids on the roster. We were quarantined like 3 times. We ended up with 8 kids on the roster. But it was a rough, difficult season this year for sure.
What is it like being a coach, and did opportunities come to you? Are you still looking for opportunities? Are you happy where you're at? How does that all work in the mentality of being a coach?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I've been debating this since the season ended. One of the hardest parts of my coaching career was when I got divorced, because I wanted to have joint custody of my daughter, which I do. But so that was my last year at Shortridge and this past year. So on the way our schedule's set up, like I'll have her on Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or I'll have her on Wednesday and Thursday, just it rotates. And the hard part about that is like I was blessed to have my mom pick my daughter up on those days, go over her homework with her, feed her for the most part. And then I straggle in, you know, and I've got an hour and a half, you know, to spend with my daughter. And it made it difficult, you know, and she was very understanding at first, but then it's like, and she doesn't play basketball, she plays soccer. And then she comes to me, I'd say after I got my 100th win in February, she comes to me and she's like, you did it. I'm like, I did what? She's like, you got your 100th win. I said, okay, thank you. And she goes, no, you don't understand. And I was like, what? And she's like, I'm ready to start playing. You know, it's kind of like from the movie Hoosiers when he's ready to start playing. So I said, oh, you are? I said, I'm so excited. You know, she's the tallest kid in the 2nd and 3rd grade at her school. And I'm like, I'm so excited. I said, you know, I got her a basketball goal for her birthday last September. I'm like, we'll start working on it. She goes, but the only catch is, she's like, I'm not playing for anybody but you. You have to be my coach. And so, you know, having that in the back of my mind and things like that. I mean, I don't know what my future holds. I know that there's one place that I would like to go to kind of make things go full circle, you know, if that opportunity arises. But as far as that, I mean, I'd like to spend more time with her, because when I was married, it was easy because it wasn't easy, but she was there every night. I come home, we'd have dinner. And then every Sunday was our day where we'd go to the park, or when I was at Irvinggton, we'd go play hide and seek in the school, or shoot baskets, or she'd ride her bike over there. So I'd say, you know, and that's one thing that a lot of coaches don't talk about. I know Brady from Southwestern Shelbyville has talked a little bit about it, but that can be one of the most difficult parts about the whole coaching thing, is when you're in a situation where, you know, you're divorced and you're trying to take care of your child, like in the time you have them.
You know, not only is that a Hoosier type story, the previous one where, you know, you kicked the guy off the team and he came back and became a success, that's a Hoosier type story, and that's got to fill your heart as a coach.
It does. I mean, and like I said, I was trying to send a message. And this kid, to this day, you know, I run into him from time to time, and we've talked about it, and that he wasn't in the right place in his head, academically or basketball wise, or outside of basketball wise. And it kind of, you know, it was an awakening to him. And, you know, I hated doing that. We would have won more than 10 games that year. We probably would have won a lot more, but at the same time, when you're coming into a new situation and you're already having kids that aren't listening and following directions, sometimes and he was one of the worst ones. By doing that, it did allow us to get more out of the season than what we would have if they were just constantly thinking they were going to do what they're going to do.
Coach Strange, did you have to fill your schedule, find games? Did you have to do contracts with referees, any of this during your career, or is it someone else had to do that?
When I was at Irvinggton, they had opened it up to me because the athletic director was, you know, she was, I don't even want to know how much she was getting paid. It wasn't a lot. And she had to do all the middle school, all the elementary, all the high school stuff. And I'd said to her, as a matter of fact, she used to be the head women's coach at IUPUI. Shan Hart was her name. And I was like, Shan, I said, I'll go ahead and reach out to these schools, you know, and then I'll have them send you contracts. So there were a lot of schools I reached out to that didn't want to play us. I know we opened up with the Marion Giants my first 5 years up in Marion. And, you know, and I'll tell you, my second year, a guy named Chris Quinn was on my staff. He would have been the head coach at Chittard prior to that. We opened up the season playing up in Marion. And then we end up playing a game that year. And I didn't do the schedule this year, but we ended up playing a team called Church of Acts in a church where they roll the pews back and then they pull the tarp off and they drop the basketball goals. I don't know where these students from Church of Acts came from, but some of the kids are like, that kid goes to Beech Grove, and that kid goes here. And then the referees, they didn't have the patches on their sleeve, which is always a bad sign. And we ended up beating them that game. But so we played at Marion, we played in a church, and then we played a school called Fountain Square Academy, where it was in a Goodwill store. So it wasn't like a gym, it was a Goodwill store, or just a building that had kind of like a curvature on it, and they had baskets in there. And so they had to move the merch out so we could play the game. I was like, goodness. It was a pretty funny season.
What was what is your when it comes to referees? How many times you've been kicked out? How many tees have you gotten? Are you pretty good with referees after the experience that you've had coaching?
When I was younger, I was wound a lot more tighter, where I would be up and I would be, just I would get upset about calls. I didn't get a lot of technical fouls, but I would be more into the officials than I am now. A lot of it changed when my daughter was born 8 years ago, because sometimes I would get so worked up. I'm just like, yeah, I need to take a deep breath and take a step back. Not that, just for health reasons. I didn't want to kill over and die of a heart attack on the court. And I was blessed to have assistant coaches that were really good of reeling me in. I had a coach, Roger Thomas, that I coached with for years. He passed from brain cancer a couple of years ago. But he always knew he'd be on my sleeve, pull me back. And then Bill Woodson did a great job of it. And I know it's funny because we were playing at Indian Creek earlier this year, and Woodson was sitting behind my bench, but he wasn't on my staff. Obviously, he's at St. Mary of the Woods now. And I started to get upset. And I kind of shut myself down. Like, yeah, it's not worth getting all worked up. And then I looked behind the bench and I'm like, Bill, I said, where were you? I said, I needed you about 3 minutes ago. And he's like, I can't come out there and get you. He's like, have your assistant coaches come get you. But I mean, I don't know. When I was younger, I idolized Bobby Knight, and he did a lot of stuff. And, I would get angry and think, I never threw any chairs or anything like that. I don't think I got a technical my last year at Shortridge. But prior to that, and it was a dumb situation because we turned the ball over, and I had a piece of gum in my mouth, and it had lost its flavor. When gum loses its flavor, you don't want to chew it anymore. And so down towards the end of our bench, there was this trash can. And so I shouldn't have done this because it hurt my shoulder, but I took the gum and I had a look on my face and I threw the gum down and I hit the rim of the trash can, but I missed it. And the official gave me a technical foul. And I was like, for what? And so it's funny because Chris Shields, who was the head of officials, he came and did our next game. And he's like, shame on you. I said, Chris, it lost its flavor. He goes, I understand. He goes, I get it serious. He goes, I talked to that official about that. That shouldn't have been a technical foul. I was like, thank you. But I only got kicked out of one game, and that's when I was coaching JV at Tech. We were playing Cathedral in the city tournament, so there's already, a lot of passion burning, wanting to beat them. And they were pressing us, and we threw the ball in bounds, and the Cathedral kid kicked the ball up in the air, kicked it to his teammate, and they laid it in. So I kind of went out on the floor a little bit to have a discussion about the kickball, and he gave me a technical foul. And then I tried to talk to the other official, because when you get a technical foul, they're supposed to rotate, because they're supposed to send somebody else to you to let you say what you want to say, because obviously you've offended the first official. And he chases me over, the one that gave me the technical, before I could talk to the other guy. And again, I was young. I was probably in my mid-20s. So he gives me the second technical foul because I didn't go back to my bench. And so I was just like, all right. So the varsity game was afterwards. I'm sitting on the bench prior to the game, and the official actually comes over and apologizes to me and tells me that he was in the wrong for giving me the second technical foul. And he said it was a kickball. He goes, but the first technical was justified because I was on the floor. And I said, I agree. And he's like, I'm not going to turn it in. But he's like, he goes, I could have been more professional. He said he could have been more professional. And I said, well, I shouldn't have walked on the floor. So that was the only time I was ever kicked out of a game.
We knew it was on when Coach would ask me to go up to his wife and get his coat jacket, and when I bring it down, he smokes a cigarette during halftime. We knew he was stressed out when he had to pull out a cigarette.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, are you a historian of the game? Do you like the history of the game, or do you look more toward the future of the game? You understand what I'm saying?
I do. I'm more of a historian. I really am. I was having this conversation with another coach the other day. A lot of high school basketball now is going the way of AAU. A lot of coaches being hired are AAU coaches or were AAU coaches. So like now, 27 years in, I'm one of the old dogs. But there are certain unwritten rules that these coaches are breaking because they don't follow them in the AAU. Meaning like the fact that if you're up by 30 points and there's 3 minutes to go in the game, even maybe earlier, you don't press. But these coaches now, they're going to press you. They're going to press you. They want to beat you by 100. And that wasn't the way I was taught as a player. And that wasn't the way that, anybody I coached with or anytime I ever coached, we did anything like that. As a matter of fact, one time we were beating somebody by 16 when I was at Roncalli, and we weren't pressing. But, I mean, we were still playing hard and wants to come down. He's like, hey, are you done? Or he's like, this game's over. And I'm like, I said, yeah, you're right. I didn't feel comfortable with the 16, but he's right. The other thing is like that timeout where they're killing you and there's a minute and a half left in the game, and they call a timeout to draw some play where they're going to try to dunk on your bench kids that you're playing. I mean, unwritten rules like that, it's something that bothers me. So I'm more of an old school historian where, I look back to some of the older coaches, and that's not the way that they did things. And as far as the future of the game, I think more and more from what I'm seeing is it's starting to go that AAU route where the coaches are hiring where AAU coaches, and there's no, unwritten rule. Like if I'm up at the end of a game and I want to get a kid in, I'll say to the official, I'll be like, stop tell him I'm not calling a timeout. I want to stop play. I just want to get this kid in the game. And that I think is the best way to handle the situation. So as far as the future of the game, I'm hoping it gets more back to fundamentals and defense and things like that. But the way that it's starting to trend is more of like an AAU type circuit deal.
Where have been some of the places that you've gone and coached inside the gym and seen what they had done in the past and the history of their past, and you felt kind of good that you got to coach a game in that gym?
Definitely Marion. From getting to go up there and watch those teams with Bill Green, I think we even went up there when Blackman was playing back in the early 80s. But definitely there. I mean, walking in there my first year as a varsity basketball coach and walking into that place, I mean, obviously the crowds back in 2010, I think it was, weren't as big as they were back in the 1980s, but it just walking in there, and like Richmond, the Tiernan Center, when we were at Roncalli playing in there, it was amazing. And then, Irvinggton, there's a couple of years my teams went down and played in Lagoti's Thanksgiving tournament, which was really nice because my dad would go and he'd visit with some of his relatives, and then they go to French Lick between games and come back. But we're just going in, into that arena, from remembering going down there as a little kid. And my dad's uncle, my great uncle, used to be the one that swept the floor there. I mean, things like that. Trying to think of where, obviously, Newcastle for sure, because I went, and saw Steve Alford play there. And I remember we used to go watch Scott Hicks and Barlow's Cathedral teams play, and I remember seeing Damon play as a freshman. They played Cathedral at John Marshall was where the game was at. And it was wall to wall. And then turning around my junior year of high school, going to the RCA Dome and watching, being one of the people in the largest crowd for a high school game ever. It was up in the rafters, on one end, but, just to be there and to watch him run into his family after the game was over, just something. And then my senior year at the RCA Dome, watching Henderson, who he and I had some battles in high school. Watching him and Robinson play against each other was really special. I always wanted to coach a game at Hinkle, and I never got a chance to do that, obviously. But those are some of the places, the Newcastle's a place like that. Never got to coach at Muncie Central at their gym, which I would always like to have done that. We played when I was at Tech at a place, the Hammond Civic Center, which I thought was pretty cool, because the night after we played, they had some kind of professional wrestling event going on, and they had the flyers up for it. But just, yeah, those places, and if I do, and when I do get out of coaching, that's going to be something that I'll share with my daughter, where we'll take trips every weekend, especially, when the COVID's gone and everything's opened back up. I want to take her and show her some places. There's some gyms, random gyms on a Friday night that I'd like to go to and just check out a game. Because one thing that I always had wanted to do that I never had the opportunity to do, especially when I was married, is I always wanted to be part of a small community where you coach at the small school, you live in the town, which can be good or it could be bad, I'm sure, but it's something that I always had wanted to do that I never got the opportunity to do. Like a friend of mine, Scott McClellan at Moorestown. I mean, we played them this year in that place. That community, the way they follow that team, and they he had told me the first time he was at Moorestown that they can't practice the first day of hunting season because these players won't show up. And he's being, there's certain times during summer where they can't come to workouts because they're husking corn and stuff like that. But that's always been something that that always been on my mind, is moving to a small town and a small community and doing something there.
Besides, you told us about your, following Bobby Knight, Coach Knight. What are some people that you've gotten to meet or coach against that you were kind of like, oh, this is cool?
Coach Painter opened his practices up to high school coaches, which was nice. And so I remember when I was at Irvinggton, my staff went up there, and, we're sitting in the nice fancy leather chairs that the big wigs get to sit in. And I just thought, we were watching practice. We had a practice plan, and, we're taking notes and writing down drills and stuff. He came over, he'd get mad, and he would come over to us, and he would tell us why I'm mad. He's like, yeah, he's like, you see him? He doesn't like to go to class. He goes, I said, who does like to go to class except the engineering students, but you have to do it. And I was just like, okay. But, he was great. He was very open to us. And, I like watching him, and I like watching his success. And I know that Coach Katie was a big mentor to him. And he's been able to have that longevity. And obviously he's beat IU 9 out of the last 9 times they played. But he was a really, it wasn't like you're walking in and somebody was just doing their job. Brad Stevens was another one when he was at Butler. I went and watched their practice one time, and he was the way that he handled things was a lot different than any coach I've ever seen. He was angry. He was so mad at his team. They were loafing on sprints. And rather than yell at him, he just says, let's try it again. And so they do it again, and it's not good enough for him. And he's like, okay. He goes, if that's how it's going to be, he goes, we'll try it one more time. He goes, but the next thing that we're going to do after this is going to make your sprints look easy. And he goes, plus you could have been done 2 sets of sprints ago. And so, didn't raise his voice. And sure enough, that might have been, I don't know if that's one of the years they went to the Final Four, or it might have been right before that. But they got after it after that. And then he'd get upset when they'd mess something up, but he never raised his voice. His demeanor with them. And that's why I'm surprised. I mean, I know he hasn't won an NBA championship, but that's why I'm surprised he was able to translate to the NBA game. I mean, he is a player's coach, but when you're dealing with millions of dollars and egos and things like that, it's different than dealing with an 18 to 22-year-old kid. So Painter and, when Leo Clem was at Brebeuf, that's when I was talking about when I would do scout team. He had success at Brebeuf, and his demeanor was similar. He didn't yell, and he was a handshaker. If the guy would make a play, he'd shake his hand, but he had a lot of good sets. And so we played the first 3 plays we ran against them one time were their plays. And my point guard, Jimmy Baker, who's about all of 5'2", but one of the hardest, toughest kids you ever to meet, they called timeout. And Jimmy's like, Coach, we run their plays better than they do. But, you know, he was a good one. James Blackman did a good job with, you know, his son put 50-something up on us, the one that played at IU. He did a decent job. But Scott McClellan, I mean, he won state with Morristown. He's a guy like Wantz that's very, very detail-oriented, where he knows what's going to happen before it happens. And his kids are prepared to know what's going to happen before it happens, and they buy into it. So, you know, working with Scott, we used to work the camp together. As a matter of fact, I had to take him out and show him the ropes because he was a new guy after I was a new guy the first year, my first year there. But, you know, and then talking shop with Bob Punter, who was at Valpo, and with Baumholt and those guys. You know, I was like a sponge, you know, learning and taking as much as I could when we'd work those camps together, which was really, you know, before my career even started, I was able to rub elbows with those guys, which made it really nice.
Coach Jeff Strange, I thank you so much for your time. I know everyone is going to enjoy our conversation. I wish I would have done this earlier with you. And I think if we both jot down some more notes, I think we could probably do a part 2.
Sounds good.
Coach Strange, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.